Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show. It's great to have all of you with us tonight. Well, it's been a busy weekend of news. The annual Remembrance Day celebrations, which we're remembering today. Unfortunately, also another homicide, of course, left the country wondering what's happening with the crime situation. And, of course, a National Climate Change Conference, International Climate Change Conference, better known as COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, is underway. Now, we can confirm that the Prime Minister is on tomorrow's COP29 schedule. He's a familiar face on the climate change world stage. At last year's Climate Change Conference in Dubai, Prime Minister Davis's agenda includes highlighting the nation's challenges due to increased hurricane activity and the economic impact of climate change, a call for fair climate finance mechanisms, and emphasize the transition, of course, and how we're going to go from one particular state to where we are today. Also dealing with renewable energy, which is also part of the priority. I encourage you, of course, to stay tuned to the ZNS Network and our national newscast for more information on Prime Minister's COP29 agenda. But tonight, our focus is on the official opposition Free National Movement. Now, although the general election is still some, I guess, 2 years away, well, what are their plans? What is the Free National Movement looking at? How are potential candidates being selected? Why should Bahamians consider the party this time around? What are their views on current issues facing the country today? And of course, the national economy, their views on what is happening. Those are just some of the questions that we're going to put to the FNM leader, the Honorable Michael Pintard, who is here tonight. And of course, he assumed the party's leadership back in 2021 after the party's defeat at the polls. And we'll hear from him tonight on exactly the way forward. So when we come back from the break, joining me at the desk will be the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Michael Pintard. You're watching The Rundown. We're back right after this. Stay close. Welcome back. You're watching The Rundown live here on the ZNS Television Network. A special good evening to all of you joining us, watching us on social media, on YouTube, and of course, those of you who are in the Lion's Den. I missed you. It's good to have you back joining us online. We look forward to getting your comments and questions as you go through the interview tonight. It's going to be an exciting night. Cabinet Minister, Senator, parliamentarian, just some of the positions Michael Pintard has held since joining Bahamian politics in 2010. And before that, according to Wikipedia.com, the current Free National Movement leader worked as a consultant in the area of art and theater management and urban planning. The sitting member of parliament for the Great Marco City uses his seat in the House of Assembly to ensure the opposition voices any concern of national interest, even if it becomes a war of words between government and the opposition. Tonight, Michael Pintard gives us his perspective on the party's present and future, as well as the country's state of affairs. And I'm so happy to have him joining us here. Good evening, sir. Welcome to The Rundown.
It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
So am I. You know, you make it when you come to The Rundown, you made it. So congratulations.
No, I mean, God works in a mysterious way. I'm here tonight, and you're wearing red. I'm obviously returning to your roots. So
roots. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Oh boy, you don't start off on top. Okay, so let's jump right into it. For people who may not understand Michael Pintard and your history and your career journey, take us through that, how you got to this point, and really, what has the life of Michael Pintard been, and what has it been centered around?
Well, actually, I entered frontline politics in 1997 when I offered in Centerville against Perry Christie.
Yes.
So I've been involved a very long time. And prior to entering frontline politics, I spent a tremendous amount of time as an activist, working with a number of veteran politicians on a range of political issues. I was a student at the University of the Bahamas, then College of the Bahamas. I was arrested on Bay Street protesting after the 1984 Commission of Inquiry. And we led demonstrations because we thought that we could do better in terms of national governance. So the majority of my adult life, whether here or at Tuskegee University in Alabama or at McGill in Canada, I was involved in activism. And again, nothing has changed in that regard. My message has been consistent over the years. As you would be aware, I studied agriculture at the College of the Bahamas. I went on to study plant and soil science at Tuskegee and did some graduate courses in agricultural economics at McGill. Returned home. I'm qualified as a as a anti-money laundering and compliance officer after 2 years of training.
Wow.
So, and I function largely as a human resources development consultant over the years, and my love is the creative arts, and I'm a proud member of the creative arts community.
Was in any of your plans and your aspirations the desire to one day sit in the seat of the Prime Minister of the country?
No, it was not a childhood dream. I didn't have an epiphany from God. The reality is I simply want to be a part of empowering people in general, Bahamians in particular. And entering frontline politics, I saw it as a larger platform to do the work I was already doing. And so if you were to look at every revenue-generating profession that I have pursued, it's always had a social impact component. So it's never been entrepreneurship strictly to generate money. It's been social entrepreneurship. How can I find my passion, make sure that that passion is impacting persons, and in the process pay my bills? And so my life has gone in a direction I did not expect, but certainly after the 2021 election, I made a determination, having served in a number of capacities within the party and in the country, that I ought to offer to ensure that we have the kind of leadership transition the country needs. And I believe there's a need for a new generation of leaders on both sides of the political divide. And I believe my sensibility, having lived in so many communities in the Bahamas, I have a very clear sense of what a number of the challenges are in the country, and have a clear sense, certainly clearer than what is being expressed now in the government, in terms of what some of the solutions are to some of those challenges. And so as a Coconut Grove a young man, I grew up in Angliston and Coconut Grove. I've lived through at least 6 corners in Coconut Grove, lived twice in Yellow Elder, lived off Camp Road on Arawak Avenue, lived in Mount Pleasant. We've moved quite a bit, and it's allowed me to interact with many Bahamians, to understand the struggles firsthand. And prior to moving to Grand Bahama, some 16 years ago, I lived in Fox Hill, Step Street. 12 and a half years, and I have grown to love that community and love the people in Fox Hill and understand the challenges that they have in general, and as a historic community, the way in which we have missed an opportunity to transform historical communities and over the hill in the Bahamas, and I believe I have the clear vision on how we could address those issues.
We can talk about that in just a second, because I like the fact that you said missed opportunities, which in your view means that we've not taken advantage of what has been available directly in front of us.
Of course.
Well, why don't we just go there right now? Why do you call it missed opportunities?
Well, I mean, the reality is that a people that do not understand and embrace their identity is likely to mimic others. And so one of the things I talked about a lot as I traveled throughout the Bahamas, having spoken to the majority of schools or their graduations or assemblies, is that many of our young people have been colonized by tremendous influence from outside. So whether it is the African-American rap, whether it's the Jamaican dancehall, while I embrace all of our cultural forms, the reality is we ought to be able to look in the mirror and appreciate who we are and what we contribute to the world, rather than mimic or adopt the culture of others wholesale. Because what comes with that is the way in which people behave and think and function with each other. And so, again, when you look at our communities, we have not done sufficient to preserve those things that are uniquely Bahamian. And so as a result, we talk a lot about the power and the strength we can glean from our historical communities, but you don't see the evidence of us having done a good enough job preserving it, as well as documenting that history and then holding up as examples those persons who've emerged from those communities. And so I believe there's more we can and must do with Gambia, with Adelaide, with Fox Hill, with Baintown, And so that's a part of, I believe, what any serious government would do. There is a benefit to our national identity. There's a benefit in terms of revenue generation, because people travel not only for sand, sun, and sea, but to embrace your culture. And to the extent that you can put that culture on display, people come here and interact with a people that have hundreds of years of history. And so I want to be a part of that transformation, so that we can have heritage tourism firsthand, not just talk about it, people can see and touch it. And I think that's a part of what is required to also transform the over-the-hill community in general. We celebrate the transformation of the 66th step, and while that is necessary, it's definitely not sufficient, because it's not about the 66th step alone. It's about the fort. It's about the entire Fort Hill. It's about the steps that take us into Mason's Addition and the brilliance of what the Saxons produced. We put brilliance on Bay Street. We must now put it from the top of the hill in Fort Fincastle all the way to Robinson Road. And why not we go further? It must be from all the way from Village Road to Nassau Street and beyond. So we have to transform our community so that they are livable communities, that young people appreciate themselves and their value and their worth. And so when another young man is looking at snuffing out the life of someone else, he's looking at his image, and he ought to be able to appreciate his image, that it ought to be preserved. And so again, we have some opportunities we have to seize.
As we talk about this cultural emergence that you're talking about, and the diversification of John Canoe and even the forts, you had an opportunity, many would say, as Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, to address these issues. Were these not in your purview to do during that time?
Yeah, I was Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture for 1 year. One of the fundamental things that I did when I was there is to hold a conclave with cultural artists and with John Canoes. We had a wonderful John Canoe conclave. We advanced the idea of putting in place a John Canoe commission so that we are able to put a private, quasi-private organization in place that would not only manage parades, but can conceptualize the future of John Canoe. I think the time has come for us to build multi-purpose John Canoe shacks that are not only creation spaces, but they are performance spaces, right? With a recording studio to record the music that ends up on Bay Street, a creation space for large and small costumes, to specialize in the creation of drums and cowbells, etc., to have a performance space. So these are things that we're able to do. In fact, I got Cabinet to pass the creation of multi-purpose John Canoe shacks. We ought to also allocate land to John Canoers so that they can create these spaces, and when tourists come, we no longer have the complaint that there's a scarcity of places to go, because we would have already created it. It's time for us to, in my view, even graduate from Bay Street. I know there's a nostalgic attachment to the space, but we ought to monetize what is the most dynamic cultural expression Bahamians have, so that we can create a space where multiple festivals can be held, the principle of which would be the John Canoe Festival. And Carnival is cool, but that's not our
So you would move away from Carnival and put more emphasis on John Canoe?
Oh, without question. Carnival can coexist, but it coexists in its space as one of the things on our national calendar, but certainly it cannot be at all a rival to John Canoe. It's, I mean, fundamentally different. It's our things.
It seems like we're moving in on a sacred territory to say move John Canoe off Bay Street. You're prepared to explore other avenues that might work?
Without creating a massive space where you can monetize it, where the sound is not compromised, where you can seat a lot more persons, where you can have a greater engagement of the public in the parade. But obviously, the final decision we make in that will be determined by the practitioners in conjunction with policymakers. So I offer what I believe is an idea that is not new, but whose time has come. But at the end of the day, John Canoers will get to make the final determination. But John Canoe shacks, these are things that are doable, and we can make it happen right now.
You talked about the land aspect of it, being able to give give land to John canoers. How do you believe that will enable the craft to grow?
Well, one of the things we did, first of all, was we began collecting the sites that they had in mind, seeking to get the papers, and we were well on our way in that regard. That's something that should be pretty much routine. We have adequate land, and we ought to empower cultural artists, not just in John canoe, but in other artistic forms. And the way in which that is going to empower persons, and listen, we ought not be engaging in just a temporary display of this Bahamian brilliance and genius. We ought to find a way that year-round we're able to monetize. So far more Bahamians can be traveling internationally. Far more Bahamians can be producing drums and cowbells and instruments in general, or replicas of them that people can take a piece of the Bahamas back when they go home. We can do John canoe art exhibitions in Central Bank and other spaces. We have many spaces, the Donkalik Studios, a whole range of places. And so the creative arts is one of the fastest growing, or the orange economy, the fastest growing component of national economies globally. You are creative. And the gospel segment of it has transformed many lives financially, while they seek to transform people's lives spiritually. And so we are not doing sufficient to, again, promote and contribute to its development. The Performing Arts Center certainly needs transformation. We should do a public-private partnership governed by a policy to transform that into a better space that Bahamians can use at reasonable rates to show their
You talked about the orange economy. It's something that you have had a vast experience in creating. This administration has actually perhaps moved the needle by actually creating policy around the orange economy and the School of the Performing Arts, which is now being in its growing stage and in its planning stage and so forth. Are these public policies you support? Because in Parliament, it's clear that you've brought a lot of opposition to a lot of the policies that have come forward nationally. Is that particular policy something that you support?
No, I've opposed some of the legislation that the government has brought to Parliament, and unfortunately this government is famous for bringing a piece of legislation but not necessarily complying with it. Perfect example is the procurement law. They're single sourcing many important and phenomenally expensive contracts, etc. But in terms of policy, if the policy is to develop a school for the performing arts, as I've indicated on my feet in the House of Assembly to Mr. Poitier, who's spearheading the initiative, he certainly have my support. Again, regardless of which government is in the chair, we are committed to national development, and we know the orange economy is an important way of integrating hundreds, thousands of unemployed Bahamians into the national economy. That's why we should have more grants. We should strengthen the amount of money that we put in the National Endowment Fund so that we are able to help creatives launch their programs. And so one of the things I did not have was, when I was functioning in that space, having written and ran the 7 longest running, most well-attended shows in the history of the country, we did not have the benefit of any serious institutional support from the government. There is no reason why the young artists and artisans should not benefit more. It is an investment in our future, and few things give us a platform on the international in the international arena the way the orange economy does, whether it's in sports, Buddy Hield, John Quell Jones, or Devon Charlton, or in the creative arts, as many of our visual artists and performing artists travel around the globe. So it is in our collective interest to invest the resources.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk more about public policy, your position and views on a number of them, and then talk a little bit about the position that you stand and take on. We're going to do that when we come after the break. We're talking with the leader of the opposition and the leader of the Free National Movement, Michael Pintard. You're watching The Rundown. We're back after this. Stay close. Welcome back to The Rundown. It's great to have all of you sharing with us tonight. And those of you online, good to have all of you. My guest tonight is the leader of the opposition and Free National Movement, Michael Pintard. We're talking about his position on national issues and, of course, the Free National Movement going forward. Continue. I know before the break we were talking about policies and your position on policies. We look at this session of Parliament, and are you satisfied with the policies that are being brought together for national development? I know the government has touted the fact that they're bringing so many new pieces of legislation and getting them passed in Parliament. What is your position on the legislation going forward? Because like I said before, a number of them you've not supported. Is it that you believe they don't have teeth in them? Is it that you believe it's just a matter, like you said, of accountability in enforcing them? Where do you stand when we talk about public policy and the number of pieces of legislation we've seen before Parliament?
If you've listened to the last two speeches from the throne, it's clear that the government is continuing with much of the legislation that was already in train, started by the Free National Movement or previous PLP governments, and so they have come with many amendments. There's a tremendous amount of brand new pieces of legislation.
A lot of amendments.
A tremendous amount. But what we are looking for is for them to pass the bulk of what they signaled they would do in the speech from the throne. Where we have opposed, we have proposed what the alternatives are, and we have to do more of that. Clearly, our concern is that the government is not committed to transparency in the way in which it governs. In other words, the Freedom of Information Act is something that successive governments should have moved to implement in its entirety. This government is at the tail end of a very long process, and it's regrettable that they would not allocate the required resources to make sure that the infrastructure is put in place in order to run the pilots, which they have promised for since they came to government. And the Information Commissioner has indicated that he and his team have done all that they could do. All that is left is for the government to allocate the resources. So it begs the question, why are you reluctant to create a mechanism that Bahamians can find out what you are discussing and what has driven the decisions that you have made in private? Secondly, we are always opposed when the government weakens a piece of legislation. In other words, that they give far more power to the minister or the executive and remove the teeth to hold the government accountable. So in the case now where the government has, for example, passed the ombudsman bill, we support that. But we want you now to empower that position to make sure a suitably qualified, non-partisan person is in the chair, adequate resources are made available to them so that they can be a part of holding the executive or the public service accountable for their actions. And so we don't oppose for opposition's sake. I'm a nationalist. Our deputy leader is a nationalist. The chairman is a nationalist. You're looking at three national leaders who admit when we have fallen short, when we were in the chair. And we embrace the verdict of the Bahamian people that we are in opposition because in many ways people may have felt that we didn't reflect their dreams and aspirations. We didn't move fast enough on some matters. So we accept that. What we do not accept is that because we were in government, when certain decisions were made or not made that resulted in us being out, that we are now to be silent on critical issues that we now have an opportunity to shape because we run things. Just as there's...
So you don't see it as what people are labeling it as double standard?
Oh, not
you were in there, you didn't do it, now you're complaining about it.
We are in charge. A new generation of leaders are in charge. We seek not only to be an improvement over the Progressive Liberal Party as they're governing now, we will be an improvement over our most recent previous selves. And so again, remember now, on the front bench of the Progressive Liberal Party in the Parliament are veteran politicians who were in the Christie administration, who themselves were leaders. So did that rob them of their voice when they were in opposition? Of course not. They were able to mount a spirited opposition to positions we took. We are no different, so they should not act brand new. We reserve the right to critique their policies, their legislation, and their programs, and we reserve the right to put forth what we will do differently, and that's what we've been doing. On urban renewal, we have made the point that urban renewal as a concept is what we support. No issues there. But urban renewal is about just that. It is about transforming the communities. As we began the show, I talk about transforming the community, ending outside toilets, to provide infrastructure of light and water for citizens throughout the over-the-hill community, in our family of islands, etc. It's about addressing the issue where you have unregulated developments that are eliminated and transformed, because it isn't just the shanty town, it's over the hill where our families live, where there are 5 houses in 1 yard with inadequate facilities for bathrooms or for water. It is about widening streets for safety purposes and for aesthetic purposes. It's about not just transforming one home through a corner that was 400 square feet and you make it 600 square feet and you have a whole massive ceremony when that one house is through a corner where there are 50 homes in a similar condition. So it's about raising the expectation and standards. And how can you have urban renewal and you don't have urban planners in the department? You're not utilizing the architects. You don't have sufficient social scientists. So it isn't about duplicating the services. You're doing culture in the park? Well, the Department of Culture is doing that. You're promoting sporting events? Well, sports officers have the capacity to do that. You're talking about marching bands? Those are important and nice, but do you not know that there's a Brother McDonald in Grand Bahamas who started multiple bands, and Mr. Campbell, Pastor Campbell, who started. So these are things that multiple agencies have been and have the capacity to do. Government ought to be a facilitator. We don't have to conceptualize a thing that's already conceived. We need to empower people so that they can upscale, expand the programs. Not everything that you see work, you pull it under one umbrella and you call it urban renewal. That's unimaginative. The police should not be the lead government agency in urban renewal. They should be a partner.
Who would you make the head agency for renewal?
Again, you need to put urban planners, and architects, civil engineers, all of them can work in tandem with social scientists, because it's about transforming the physical environment as well as the human condition. And so some of the work that Dr. Desiree Cox was engaged in is important work, because you need baseline studies to determine what are the challenges we have in this community, and once we bring urban renewal to bear, what will be the outcome. So it's like, the example I use is, if you have an encounter with Christ, whatever you were before, you're supposed to be different afterwards.
Right.
If the community of Over the Hill has an encounter with urban renewal, the challenges before should somehow be improved on the other end of the implementation of urban renewal. Let's be real. Have we really transformed the social conditions of Over the Hill? The short answer people will tell you is no. The best examples of improvement in terms of urbanizing areas in an orderly way have been the own ingenuity of residents who, through Palm Beach Street, changed it from a residential corner to a commercial, or Balfour Avenue or Cordo Avenue, and on and on. It hasn't been government intervention. And so we should get real, properly define what it is. And this isn't the minister defining it. We define it by objective measures of what urban renewal is. And then we ought to employ the correct persons with the requisite skill set to work in such a department in order to transform our people's lives.
I have 2 questions on that. One, are you saying then that we are too government centralized with these institutions of transformation for our country, rather than employing the people with the technical skills and the expertise to actually run them separate and aside from government, who just will provide, I guess, support and funding?
Feeling good is good, but it's not sufficient. So we run a lot of feel-good programs under incorrect banners. We have experts in sports and culture who need to be empowered and unleashed, unshackled by policymakers who are dominating qualified civil servants and beating them into submission, so that they no longer come into meetings and share their best ideas. What they do is come to say, yes, sir, minister, no, sir, minister, and after they get tired of it, they vote all of us out. And so, in the case of urban renewal, let's structure it properly. That's what I intend to do. My administration will be different. In my view, we will achieve more. I raised the question, for all the bombing the PLP did in the House of Assembly on the desk around the recent establishment of the Urban Renewal Commission, they were doing this and patting themselves on the back at a time when we just had a triple murder 2 days or so earlier. And then 2 relatives killed, so 5 murders within the space of probably 36 hours. Urban renewal, like other programs when run in tandem with your partners, is supposed to help address these issues, to re-socialize our children in families, so that they can manage their anger better, that they could resolve conflicts differently, that they're not living on top of each other because we have properly planned a community, that people have space to breed and to recreate. There's a scarcity of breeding and recreational spaces in the over-the-hill community. We have the power to compulsory acquire properties, transform them to fit different demographics. Spaces for seniors, spaces for children. Basketball courts, but you need other spaces because basketball courts are generally male-specific in this culture. So there are some fundamentally different things we need to do so that we are not titillating each other with some feel-good 1 or 2 programs and saying, but oh, look, man, didn't they look good? Didn't the band transform your life? Yes, it did, but it's been transforming your lives long before you came along. Let's empower the people who've been doing it.
The PLP is matching its policies through its blueprint of change. What does the FNM have to say, this is my plan going forward, and these are my policies?
The PLP seeks to convince us that that's what they're doing. Remember that one of their stated plans is within the first 100 days, they are going to act in a way, study in a way that they can reduce the cost of electricity. On their watch, electricity costs have gone up no less than 4 times. The government itself, now think about this, the government itself petitioned ERCA for rate increases. And on one occasion, they said if we got this rate increase through the glide path, what we will then be able to do is satisfy some obligations we have, one of which was to pay back some $110 million that the government loaned to BPL, and BPL would have paid it back to the government. First of all, it was an illegal loan. They didn't go through the appropriate process. But having raised the money, you and I having paid high electricity bill, we still don't know if the money is repaid. But more significantly, even the increase in minimum wage has been sucked away by the increase in the electricity rate already. So not just by the increase in food.
What would your policy be for electricity? Because it's something consecutive governments is struggling with because of the structure itself of BPL and how it's set up. How would you fix that?
I'm not sure we know exactly how it's set up now. The government has sought to privatize BPL.
But they said they said that's not what they're doing. They're seeking strategic partners to find ways to make it more efficiently run. What would
that's cute language. The bottom line is...
You believe it's privatizing?
Well, I mean, of course they are. They have taken the transmission and distribution assets and they've placed it in the hands of private company. And we are not opposed to privatization. What we are opposed to is a lack of competition to determine who is most suitable, in whose hands you will put the Bahamian asset. Similarly, on the generation side, there was no real competition to determine that you're going to further empower persons who are already in power for 3, 4, 5 generations to come. All we are saying is it's important that you be very transparent in your explanation of what you're doing, and then you give others, as many persons as possible, an opportunity to bid. The only competitive side of what they have been doing has been primarily in the solar space in New Providence and in the Family Islands. But the problem with the government is they are relying on the public saying, man, we'll let you all try anything as long as you can bring my bills down. The jury is still out on whether they will be able to successfully bring the cost of power down. All we are saying is we wouldn't seek to demonize any companies that the government is entering into strategic alliance with. All we say is we know you have not given adequate numbers of companies a chance to bid so we could determine who best would put us in a position to lower the cost. And so the government, well, the government is given to single sourcing things. They're doing it on a number of infrastructural projects that could be 30, 40, 50, 60 million dollars plus. They're entering into arrangements without the benefit of inviting others to bid on those contracts. And it's wrong. We would follow a procurement process, and the public-private partnerships would be governed by a policy that everybody understands. And so there's no question about how you entered into the arrangement, because the public would be able to see what you have done, and they would know what all of the terms are. Unfortunately, we don't know what the terms are with this government.
How would you address the energy challenges we're facing in the country?
Again, we left in place plans. One was the rate reduction bond. We thought that that formula, and I regret that we did not complete that before we were kicked out of office, but we believe that offered us an opportunity at a time where the interest rate for borrowing funds in order to retire the legacy debt, to transform the infrastructure at BPL, to train and retrain the staff. We thought we'd be able to raise adequate resources in order to accomplish that. That was one. The second part was we felt that we needed a hedge program so we could have predictability in the cost of fuel. And the documents that both Minister Sayers and the Prime Minister received showed that we saved $25 million up to the time we were kicked out of office, and we stood to save an additional $30+ million if we had followed the hedge program. By them canceling it, that is, refusing to continue to renew it, again, we are now subject to any increases that occur on the international market. So those are two of several things that we left in place that we thought would make a difference. If you look at the arrangement they have with Shell, in our view, we believe that even if you enter into a strategic alliance with an international company or private persons in the Bahamas, the Bahamian people should have a significant stake in the ownership of this, not to give it away. And if you're going to privatize, Bahamians should be able to buy it. You should be able to buy shares. My family and friends and Bahamians in Key West Street and Step Street and Melbourne Road and Yellow Elder, and of course in Marco City, should be able to buy in. But this government, their buy-in price is too high.
You would have given your victory speech at the last FNM convention. When you ran, you were elected. One of the things in your speech you spoke about was programs or initiatives that you felt were not effective by this present administration. One of them you spoke to was the food assistance, the breakfast program for school children. And you touted it as almost not being enough, not going far enough. Talk a little bit about that, because many people questioned that your response to that. Why didn't that policy or that program seem sufficient for you, and how would you address it?
No, absolutely. I said something completely opposite of what you just said. The point I made is that here's a government that's celebrating. Their number one thing that they're celebrating is we have now put in place, by the way, free breakfast for Bahamian children is not a new program. I mean, free lunch program. We have a free lunch program for Bahamian children who are challenged. To add breakfast is a wonderful thing. No problems there. But don't come to a nation and you are patting yourself on the back for using taxpayers' money in many cases, or wonderful partners who will partner with government to provide our children with breakfast, but you are failing to assist their parents in an economy where the average parents would rather take care of that assignment themselves. So all I'm saying is, don't play games with us. All of us want our children to eat, and eat a healthy meal so that they are energized, they are focused on their studies. But do a survey and ask parents how many of them would like to be employed. How many of them would like to no longer be underemployed, so that they could earn adequate money to not only buy their children the food that is needed in the morning or at lunchtime, but to feed them when they come home from school, to get a tutor to help them catch up in classes, to pay for the field trips that they like to go. Families want to be empowered. They don't want a government to say, vote for me because I fed your children in the morning. You fed the children in the morning is a noble thing to do, but you're doing it with the children's parents' money or grandparents or others. So don't play games patting yourself on the back for what is a simple humanitarian function any government should carry out.
I'll go to a break, but when we come back, I want to talk about two crucial areas that are critical to our economy and most economies, and that is housing and food security.
Sure.
And hear your take on what your plans are for that. You're watching Rundown with Michael Pintard. We're back after this. Stay close. Welcome back to the Rundown. My guest is Michael Pintard, leader of the Free National Movement and His Majesty's loyal opposition. And we're just talking about getting his take on the economy, policies that he proposes, that he would implement, and what he sees his administration, should he have that opportunity to serve, what would they address these issues with and bring it to them? Before the break, we talk about food security and housing. I mentioned that. Two basic needs that we see even today people are very challenged with. People can't find roof over their heads. Rent is expensive. Finding places to live is expensive. Getting a mortgage for a home, even more challenging to the average person. And then there's food security. We know how expensive it is in a food store. For a family of 3 or 4 or 5, it's expensive. It's hundreds of dollars. What are your plans when we talk about food security and housing for the Bahamian people?
I thought when I sat in the chair as Minister of Agriculture that we left in place a set of policies that we thought would catalyze, would speed up the process of us importing less products of certain categories of products and producing them ourselves. We call it import substitution. We did a study with the Food and Agriculture Organization, with CADI, one of our regional agriculture agencies, and with IECA, a group out of Latin America and the Caribbean. And we identified 77 items that we believe we could produce cost effectively. And once we did so in sufficient quantities, quality at the right price, we had a chance of earning some $250 to $300 million over a 2 to 3 year period. The study is completed. No doubt the new minister would have been able to go through it. Unfortunately, 3 years later, after they claim to have brought sexy back to agriculture, there is no product that they are able to identify, including eggs, that they have reduced the import by 4%. No, sorry, 3%. No, 2, 1, 0.5%. They have not been able to. What we have to do is, again, provide additional resources to empower Bahamians. One of the resources is land. We have to do a better job than we did when we were in the chair, better job than they are doing now in making land available to credible farmers, both through lease arrangements and through Crown grants. That's one. 2, we have a policy that we left in place. That is, every hotel, food store, restaurant must purchase at least 40% of their whatever food that they are purchasing have to be purchased from Bahamian producers. So before you start, you already know as a farmer that
you have a market.
I have a market. And if you are a Bahamian corporation, a minimum of 75 cents of every dollar you spend on food have to be bought from Bahamians. We have not exploited that, nor have we enforced that so that we are able to drive resources to these farmers, but empower the farmers so that they build capacity to produce. And so food security will be a big item on my agenda. And again, the Prime Minister, in one budget, to his credit, he had no less than the Minister of Agriculture to second the budget debate. And I said to both of them, with the kind of camaraderie both of you have a legitimate shot at doing something transformational in agriculture. But again, that was optics, because clearly they have not produced the results. The second thing I think is important is you have to work with stakeholders. We met with food stores, restaurant owners, hoteliers who are prepared to buy from Bahamian farmers. What we need now is for the government to continue the program we started. We started a program with Atlantis. They were prepared to purchase from Bahamian producers. They sent us the price, the varieties that they needed, because there are different types of onion, different types of eggs, et cetera, et cetera. And to date, we do not know that such a program has been continued. So again, food security is critical. In Grand Bahama, we should create an island-wide pantry. Tremendous amount of land. The Grand Bahama Port Authority, private citizens have land that they would make available for farming. What we need is a focused attention on how to make that happen. It is my hope that the present minister will be able to make progress. We stand ready to work with him. We believe he's a reasonable person, and we are prepared to help.
What about housing?
We need a housing revolution in the country. Again, prior to our last administration in government, we had, in fact, a stellar housing program under each of our 3 non-consecutive terms. We built a tremendous amount of houses. We went in a different direction, unfortunately, the last time. This government has come in. They've done some houses, but they are, again, tinkering around the edges, the very thing they said they would not do. We need a housing revolution. We need affordable homes that hit different demographics. So the persons that are over the hill, whose income level may be combined in the house, maybe $1,000, can we create a package of homes in that category? The short answer is yes. There are others who need a combined income available where they could pay a mortgage of $1,200 to $2,000 to $3,000. Again, we have to unleash, again, a housing revolution, which means the government making available some of the land, the way in which we treat with supplies coming into the country. We have to make adjustments there so that we are able to get supplies in to feed this particular program. So we should work with building supply companies throughout the Bahamas in order to make this happen. So we have several of the key inputs: land, access to building material at concessionary rates, because you control what happens at the border, and to empower businesses, not to circumvent them. You can work with the builders. You work with the building supply companies. You work with builders. There are a number of suitably qualified contractors. Stop giving contractors to your friends and your family and folks who can't build, because roofs keep collapsing on this road, in the community. And so we have to do better.
So a shade going on here.
So we ought to work with qualified builders who meet the specification, who have a track record of having worked successfully, and we believe financial institutions will come on board. What we said about urban renewal, don't recreate what other segments of government have the ability to do in terms of getting into loans and for repairs, etc. We have the agencies to do that.
When you say that, I said to myself, if you're given the opportunity to lead, you're going to find yourself with age-old practices in politics where people that support the party expect to benefit from the party. How are you going to separate yourself from that? How are you going to say to your supporters who say, listen, man, it's not now time for my contract. No, you can have a contract. I got to go to somebody who can capably do that work. You're going to be a very unpopular leader, because it seems as if parties grapple with that every time they get in office.
I believe we are underestimating the population. The population wants to make sure that if they were historically left out, that you make sure that they can make it on the line, and many of them to make it to the front of the line. But they also want suitably qualified persons. And at the end of the day, certainly within the FNM, and we believe a lot of Bahamians, they want this tribalism to be reduced. They want Bahamians to eat.
Are you willing to give contracts to PLPs if you're elected?
I'm willing to follow the procurement law, which means qualified people will be able to bid and succeed.
Will politics play a part of that?
PLP.
It doesn't matter your politics.
Let me give a practical example. I represent Marco City, and I'm grateful for their support. When we were able to make any kind of recommendations on the list were FNM contractors and PLP contractors. I use the example of a young man who people in Grand Bahama know very well. Outstanding basketball player. His son is even better than him. Brother Miller. And I used to make the point that if anybody questioned why would you always have his name and others on the list, I would say Brother Miller helped Falcons Boys Club.
Right.
You know them. Reach Out Ministries, 2 outstanding mentoring programs. Do I really care what his politics is when he is making a contribution to the next generation of our young people? And so the reality is, I'm not foolish. I believe people who have historically been left out, we need to bring them to the front of the line. However, we should not leave other Bahamians behind, because all of us deserve an opportunity. And that's what Michael Pintard, Shannon Cartwright, Dwayne Sands, and our team offer that's different than this Prime Minister and his deputy, and definitely the chairman. We believe that all Bahamians deserve an opportunity to bid on contracts, to access contracts.
Now, you call some names who've been in previous administrations who didn't demonstrate that.
Well, I don't know that. I understand from people who interacted with either of them that they made opportunities available to all Bahamians. And so I'm saying the Prime Minister missed an opportunity in his first 3 years to say to his base that, listen, I'm governing for all Bahamians. And unfortunately, he's running out of time, particularly since he intends to go early.
But do you feel that? Because a lot of people feel that's why he has challenges with the base, is because he is not taking care of the base's need, but he's been doing just that, giving Bahamians opportunities, and that's why the base perhaps is upset.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because the small contractors in Grand Bahama who've helped with small home repairs and urban renewal, they haven't been paid. So clearly, he's not providing opportunity for them to get paid for work they've already done. So I'm not sure who he's providing opportunities for. The women who make less than $400 who worked in urban renewal when the PLP came to government and were wholesalely fired, he certainly wasn't working on their behalf. He should have had the courage of his conviction to resist those that were calling for the seats that others were in and doing a reasonable job. Now, some of the higher positions that you wanted to put your people in to make sure there's no obstruction, etc., we could kind of understand that. Consultants, you came with one government, you pack up and generally leave with them, fine. But the average mother, single mother, or the mother who's become the breadwinner because the husband is ill, you're going to put them out the pasture? No, I think he's missed an opportunity. Is he a nice person? Yes. Is he a productive person? No. And so I think he has to be less tribalistic, and he has to speak to his team. We are here to govern for all Bahamians. And plus, Clint, the Prime Minister has to spend more time at home working on the national agenda. Do you know that the government has overspent its travel budget by $5 million? And what we're saying is, yes, governments travel, but does your entourage have to be as large as it is? Is everybody on your entourage, are they fit for the particular assignment that they are going away on? Should a Prime Minister go where there's mainly ministers? Should a minister go where there's mainly permanent secretaries at those meetings? So he has to focus. This is a difficult job, and you need a Prime Minister who is spending time on his job. He cannot give his job to a technical officer in order for them to execute Ministry of Finance. He has to.
I want to put us on fast track because we got about 3 minutes left.
No
I got
problem.
a couple other things.
No problem.
Let's talk about Grand Bahama. The whole issue with the port and the government.
Yeah.
Where do you stand with that? People believe you're not supporting the people, or supporting the government's position in this. Do you believe the port is a part of the challenge in Grand Bahama?
Of course they are. In fact, the people who believe that may have been on one of those trips, or many of those trips, so they missed the news. The reality is that we believe that there should be a reconfiguration of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. More Bahamians ought to be at the forefront who, for example, are licensees in Grand Bahama. They should have a say in how service charges are applied, when you are repossessing land, how that process takes place. They should be a part of determining how land should be allocated in Grand Bahama. So we do not support the status quo in Grand Bahama. What we also do not support is central government to take over the municipal functions that exist in Grand Bahama.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
And they should not be having a public row. Have some decorum.
Okay, good. Healthcare. Your party has been very vocal about constructing a new hospital. People believe we do need something else to supplement PMH. What is your position with healthcare?
We simply say, if you're going to build a new hospital, just answer the healthcare workers who are asking the question. We have a shortage of 400 nurses now. Where will you get the additional nurses from? We have a shortage of persons in radiology and all allied health areas. Where will you get sufficient persons to person or man or woman the new facilities in Grand Bahama and in New Providence when you are unable to adequately man the facility in New Providence or improve upon the RAN and PMH?
Next question. As your party began selecting candidates for next election, what kind of candidates are you looking for?
We are well on our way in that process, but I just want to put this as a footnote. The government is 3 years in, having not fulfilled its mandate, yet it is campaigning to renew the relationship. If the relationship has historically been bad, you haven't fulfilled your promises, you are in a weak position to make the case to a public going forward. We are, in fact, going through a training program as we speak, and we are selecting people who have a track record of service in the community, who are suitably qualified, and who committed to integrity in public life. And we believe we have a wonderful group to choose from, and we will form the next government by the grace of God.
30 seconds. Are you going to run Dr. Minnis again?
Our council is going to make a determination.
What do you personally feel?
I feel that the Bahamian people are not discussing Dr. Minnis at the moment. They're discussing how could they reduce the cost of electricity. How can we put food on the table? How can we discontinue renting 3 apartments in 1 calendar year? My focus is not on personalities. It's on transforming the condition of our people, stopping this bloodshed in our homes, on our streets, and in our school. And we need leadership that can do that. This present leadership has not been able to, and so we believe it's time to usher in this unstoppable change. And Clint, we welcome you to join.
Will you leave me alone? What are you talking about? Thank you, sir, for coming. I must say, I got to have you back because we got more stuff to talk about. So I have to have you back.
I look forward to it.
Thank you for talking with us. We appreciate it tonight.
My pleasure.
That's the rundown. He's trying to cause me speechless tonight. What do I say at the end of the show? That's our show. Thanks so much for joining us. Is Royson here? Oh, he's 11 o'clock news. He's here. So he'll be joining him at 11 o'clock. So 11 o'clock news, Royson Jones is in the house. On behalf of all of us, I'm Clint Watson. Thanks so much for joining us. It's going to be a great show tomorrow night. You want to be here for that tomorrow night. The Minister of Tourism, the acting Prime Minister, Chester Cooper, is here tomorrow to talk about tourism. So shaking your head.
The coolest part.
Good night, everybody.